What if HSBC, Citibank, and Standard Chartered have already been using XDC network infrastructure for months through the Contour platform, processing billions in trade finance transactions? But they're legally bound by NDAs not to announce it publicly until regulatory testing is complete. Welcome to Crypto Journal. Hit that like button if you value this type of institutional detective work that exposes what's happening behind corporate and banking firewalls. And don't forget to join the channel membership where I'll be uploading exclusive intel on silent institutional adoption patterns and when these NDAs are likely to expire. You'll see the join button right next to subscribe. After you understand how Tier 1 banks actually integrate blockchain without public announcements, you'll know why tracking these developments gives you years of advanced positioning. We're in November 2025, and XDC Network just acquired Contour, a trade finance platform that was originally backed by HSBC, Citibank, Standard Chartered, BNP Paribas, and DBS Bank. These aren't crypto-native companies. These are Tier 1 global banks that move trillions of dollars annually, and they've already been using Contour's infrastructure. Now XDC owns that platform and is integrating blockchain settlement rails. Stick around because at the 20-minute mark, I'm going to reveal why major banks could announce XDC integration all at once in Q1 or Q2 2026 and what that would do to XDC's valuation. Let me start by explaining the Contour acquisition because once you understand what XDC actually bought, everything about silent corporate adoption makes perfect sense. On October 21, 2025, XDC Ventures announced they acquired Contour Network. At first glance, this might seem like just another blockchain acquisition. But look deeper. Contour isn't some failed startup. Contour is a trade finance platform specifically designed to digitize letters of credit. Letters of credit are the backbone of international trade. When a company in China ships goods to a buyer in Europe, neither party fully trusts the other. The Chinese exporter wants payment guarantees. The European importer wants delivery guarantees. Banks issue letters of credit as the trust mechanism. The bank guarantees payment to the exporter if they prove delivery. This system processes $9.7 trillion in global trade finance annually. 9.7 trillion with AT. But here's the problem. Letters of credit are painfully slow. They rely on paper documents, manual verification, and intermediary banks. Processing a single letter of credit takes 5 to 10 days on average. Sometimes weeks. Contour was built to solve this. Contour digitized the entire letter of credit process. Documentation, verification, and settlement all happen electronically. Banks that used Contour reduced processing times from days to hours. In live pilot programs with HSBC Singapore and Standard Chartered Hong Kong, Contour demonstrated 90% reductions in processing time. Think about what that means. If you're HSBC and you can process letters of credit 90% faster than competitors, you win deals. You capture market share. You generate more revenue with the same staff. This isn't speculative technology. This is proven competitive advantage. HSBC, Citi, Standard Chartered, BNP Paribas, and DBS Bank all backed Contour because they saw the value. They invested capital. They integrated the platform into their trade finance operations. They processed over $4 billion in digital letters of credit through Contour. But Contour struggled to scale. Despite bank backing and proven technology, they couldn't secure enough funding to expand globally. In late 2023, Contour shut down. Then in February 2024, a Singapore fintech called Zaltz revived Contour. They restructured the company, reduced staff by 90%, and maintained the platform's core infrastructure. Most of the 30-plus agreements under the Contour network went dormant, but not terminated. Now in October 2025, XDC Ventures bought Contour from Zaltz. And here's the critical part. XDC isn't just buying defunct technology. They're buying relationships with Tier 1 banks. They're buying a platform that HSBC, Citi, and Standard Chartered already tested and validated. They're buying agreements and integration pathways into the largest banks in the world. XDC's co-founder Ritesh Kakkad said it directly. Contour is a very prominent player when it comes to trade finance because they digitize LCS, and still many banks use the backroom of Contour. Many banks still use the backroom of Contour. Present tense, not past tense. Banks are using this infrastructure right now, and XDC just acquired it. If you're still with me, comment HSBC already on board. I want to see who understands that the infrastructure for institutional adoption already exists. Now let me explain what XDC is doing with Contour and why this could trigger mass corporate adoption without individual announcements. XDC's plan is to fully integrate the XDC network as Contour settlement and tokenization backbone. Think about what that means. Banks that already use Contour for digitizing letters of credit will now have those transactions settling on XDC blockchain infrastructure. HSBC processed letters of credit through Contour before. Now when they restart using the new XDC on Contour, those letters of credit will settle using blockchain rails. Citi integrated Contour into trade finance systems. When they re-engage with a revamped platform, XDC Network handles settlement. Standard Chartered ran pilots with Contour in Hong Kong. When they expand usage, transactions flow through XDC infrastructure. The banks don't necessarily need to announce they're using blockchain. From their perspective, they're using Contour, a trade finance platform they already know and trust. The fact that Contour now runs on XDC blockchain infrastructure is back-end architecture. Customers see faster settlements and lower costs. Banks see operational efficiency. The underlying blockchain is invisible to end users. This is exactly how enterprise blockchain adoption happens. Not with press releases and marketing campaigns, but with quiet back-end integration that improves operations without disrupting workflows. And XDC has structured this brilliantly. They're not asking banks to adopt crypto. They're offering banks a familiar platform they already validated, now upgraded with blockchain efficiency. XDC also launched a stablecoin lab specifically to pilot regulated stablecoin issuance and settlement with banks and corporations. This lab will test how USDC can be used to settle trade transactions on blockchain more efficiently than traditional rails. They're working with regulators in the United States, European Union, and Asia to ensure compliance before going live. This is critical. Banks won't touch blockchain without regulatory approval. XDC is proactively engaging regulators, running compliant pilots, and building the legal framework before scaling. Once regulatory testing is complete, which Cuckcut indicated could be early 2026, banks can deploy at scale without regulatory risk. That's when announcements happen, not during testing, during full deployment. Cuckcut also said XDC is talking to some members from the original core Contour team to rejoin. 1 or 2 people from top management may join very soon. This signals XDC is serious about reviving not just the technology, but the institutional relationships Contour built. Those relationships with HSBC, Citi, Standard Chartered, BNP Paribas, and DBS are the real value. And XDC is strategically re-engaging the people who built those relationships. Now let me show you why corporations and banks intentionally delay blockchain announcements even when they're actively using the technology. First reason, regulatory testing timelines. When banks pilot new technology, especially blockchain, they must complete extensive regulatory review. Compliance departments, risk committees, and external auditors all scrutinize the system. This takes 6 to 12 months minimum. During testing, banks are contractually and legally prohibited from public disclosure. NDAs with technology vendors prevent announcements. Internal policies prevent discussing unproven systems with media. Only after regulatory sign-off, typically from entities like the Federal Reserve, ECB, or national banking regulators, can banks announce deployment. XDC's Stablecoin Lab is currently in this regulatory testing phase. They're working with US, EU, and Asian regulators. Until testing completes, neither XDC nor participating banks can announce specific partnerships. Second reason, competitive positioning. If HSBC announces they're using XDC blockchain for faster trade finance settlement, every competitor bank immediately contacts XDC. JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, Barclays, BNP Paribas all want the same advantage. HSBC's competitive edge disappears overnight. So HSBC stays silent. They deploy the technology. They capture efficiency gains. They win market share by offering faster letter of credit processing. Competitors don't know why HSBC is suddenly faster and cheaper. By the time competitors figure it out and implement their own blockchain solutions, HSBC has already captured years of advantage. This is standard practice in banking. Competitive advantages are protected until they're no longer advantages. Then banks announce to appear innovative. But the real value was already extracted during the silent period. Third reason, shareholder and media management. Public companies, especially banks, face intense scrutiny. If a bank announces blockchain adoption, financial media writes articles questioning the risks. Is blockchain secure? What about crypto volatility? Are customer funds at risk? Analysts on earnings calls ask difficult questions. Management spends time defending technology choices instead of discussing business performance. But if the bank just quietly upgrades back-end infrastructure without announcement, no one asks questions. Earnings improve due to operational efficiency. Margins expand. Shareholders are happy. No one cares what technology enabled the improvement. This is why banks prefer stealth deployment. Better outcomes with zero controversy. Fourth reason, employee and union considerations. Banks employ hundreds of thousands of people. If management announces they're automating trade finance with blockchain, employees worry about job security. Unions demand renegotiation of contracts. Internal morale suffers. But if management just upgrades systems without fanfare, employees continue their jobs with better tools. Workflow improves. Job satisfaction might even increase due to less manual work. Zero friction. Zero controversy. And fifth reason, vendor NDA requirements. Technology vendors like XDC often require enterprise clients to sign multi-year NDAs. These agreements protect proprietary technology, prevent competitors from learning implementation details, and give vendors time to refine the product before public scrutiny. XDC's agreement with participating banks almost certainly includes NDA clauses preventing public disclosure during pilot phases. These 5 reasons explain why HSBC, Citi, Standard Chartered, and other counterbanks could be using XDC infrastructure right now with zero public announcements. And why all those announcements could happen suddenly in Q1 or Q2 2026 when NDAs expire and regulatory testing completes. Comment NDA expiration Q1 2026 if you're seeing the timeline for when silent adoption goes public. Let me show you the specific indicators that Tier 1 banks are already positioning for XDC integration. First indicator, XDC launched tokenized money market funds from BlackRock, Fidelity, State Street, and a burden in partnership with Arcax in February 2025. These are the world's largest asset managers. Their funds are now tokenized on XDC Network. This wasn't a speculative pilot. This was full deployment with real assets. Banks that custody these tokenized funds need XDC infrastructure. They need wallets, nodes, and settlement capabilities. That infrastructure is being built right now, behind the scenes, without public announcements. Second indicator, XDC integrated native USDC via Circle's cross-chain transfer protocol version 2 in October 2025. This enables secure, bridge-free stablecoin transfers on XDC Network. Banks won't use blockchain without regulated stablecoins. USDC is the gold standard for institutional stablecoin adoption. Circle is regulated, audited, and trusted by traditional finance. XDC's native USDC integration removes the final barrier for banks to deploy at scale. Third indicator, XDC joined the MiCA Crypto Alliance in May 2025. MCA is the European Union's markets and crypto assets regulation. This alliance includes blockchain networks, policy experts, and financial institutions working to create compliant frameworks for digital assets in Europe. XDC's participation signals they're preparing for European bank adoption. European banks like BNP Paribas, Deutsche Bank, and Santander all require MiCA compliance before deploying blockchain. XDC is building that compliance now. Fourth indicator, XDC integrated with Elliptic in May 2025. Elliptic is the global leader in blockchain compliance and anti-money laundering analytics. Over 500 financial institutions use Elliptic to monitor blockchain transactions for illicit activity. Banks are legally required to have AML monitoring. Without elliptic integration, banks can't touch XDC. With elliptic integration, they can. This integration happened 8 months ago. Banks have had time to test, validate, and prepare deployment. Fifth indicator, XDC integrated with Udala for institutional custody in May 2025. Udala provides MPC wallets and secure digital asset management for banks and institutions. Udala processes $8 billion in monthly transaction volume. This is institutional-grade custody that meets banking regulatory requirements. Banks can't hold crypto assets without proper custody solutions. XDC solved this with Udala 8 months ago. Sixth indicator, XDCS Exchange traded product launched on SX Swiss Exchange in October 2025 under ticker XDCN. This ETP holds $47 million in assets under management with custody from Deutsche Börse Clearstream. Institutional investors now have a regulated vehicle to gain XDC exposure. Banks that can't directly hold crypto assets can gain exposure through the ETP. This product didn't exist a year ago. Now it's live with institutional custody and nearly 50 million in AM. Every single one of these infrastructure components went live between February and October 2025. Native USDC integration, elliptic compliance monitoring, Udala custody, MCA Alliance membership, regulated ETP, and counter acquisition with Tier 1 bank relationships. This isn't preparation for future adoption. This is infrastructure for current adoption that hasn't been announced yet. The pattern is unmistakable. XDC has systematically built every piece of infrastructure that banks require: compliance, custody, stablecoins, regulatory frameworks, and trade finance platforms. And they did it all in 2025 while XDC price consolidated. Retail investors lost interest, but institutions were building. Now let me show you historical precedent of technology adoption happening silently in banking before sudden mass announcements. Example 1, SWFT GPI, which stands for Global Payments Innovation. Between 2017 and 2019, SWFT rolled out GPI to enable faster cross-border payments. Dozens of major banks integrated GPI during testing phases. No public announcements, no marketing campaigns, just quiet pilot programs with select banks. Then in 2019 and 2020, SWFT announced that over 100 banks were using GPI, processing trillions in cross-border payments. The technology had been deployed for over 2 years before public awareness. Retail investors who followed blockchain for cross-border payments missed the entire adoption curve. By the time it was public knowledge, adoption was complete. Example 2, R3 Corda blockchain for banking. Between 2015 and 2018, R3 built Corda specifically for banks and financial institutions. Over 200 banks and companies joined the R3 consortium. They were testing Corda for trade finance, security settlement, and payments. Almost no public information about what they were building or deploying. Then in 2018 and 2019, banks started announcing Corda deployments. SGX, the Singapore exchange, deployed Corda for bond settlements. HSBC used Corda for letters of credit. NG Bank deployed Corda for trade finance. Adoption had been happening for 3 years silently. By the time retail investors heard about Corda, institutional deployment was already scaling. Example 3, JP Morgan's JPM Coin. JP Morgan developed JPM Coin, a stablecoin for internal bank settlements, starting in 2018. They piloted it internally for over a year with zero public disclosure beyond initial announcement. Then in 2020 and 2021, JP Morgan announced JPM Coin was processing billions in daily settlements for corporate clients. Technology that had been deployed internally for years suddenly became public. XDC adoption is following the exact same pattern. Infrastructure built between 2023 and 2025. Pilot programs with banks through Contour. Regulatory testing with US, EU, and Asian authorities. Compliance and custody integrations complete. Stablecoin rails deployed. All happening silently. Announcements will come in 2026 when testing completes and banks receive regulatory approval for production deployment. If you're still watching, comment pilot to production timeline. I want to know who's tracking the enterprise adoption curve. Let me break down the exact timeline for when silent adoption transitions to public announcements. Current state, November 2025. XDC is under NDA with banks participating in contour pilots and stablecoin lab testing. Regulatory engagement happening with US, EU, and Asian authorities. Infrastructure complete. Testing in progress. Zero public announcements about specific bank partnerships. Q4 2025, December. Initial regulatory feedback received from pilot programs. Banks evaluate results internally. Compliance committees review findings. Risk assessments completed. Still no public announcements. Internal decision making only. Q1 2026, January through March. First wave of regulatory approvals likely. Early NDAs from contour partnerships begin expiring. XDC gains permission to announce 1 to 3 pilot bank partnerships. Market reacts positively. XDC rallies 20 to 40% on institutional validation. Media coverage begins. Retail investors start paying attention. Q2 2026, April through June. Regulatory clarity solidifies across multiple jurisdictions. Banks that completed successful pilots move to production deployment. With initial announcements, public and regulatory approval secured, other banks feel comfortable announcing their own XDC integration. Network effects accelerate. XDC announces 5 to 10 bank partnerships. Price rallies another 50 to 100% as institutional narrative solidifies. Q3 2026, July through September. Trade finance transactions processing billions in volume through XDC and contour infrastructure. Tokenized letters of credit become standard in certain trade corridors. Media publishes case studies showing 90% processing time reductions and 60% cost savings. Competitor banks rush to adopt XDC to avoid being left behind. XDC announces 15 to 20 bank integrations. Q4 2026, October through December. XDC reveals that 50-plus banks have been using their infrastructure, many for over a year. Transaction volumes are massive. Revenue is proven. XDC gets re-rated from speculative blockchain to critical financial infrastructure. Market cap expands toward $5 to $10 billion. This timeline is based on standard enterprise technology adoption patterns in banking. The key insight is adoption happens first silently over 12 to 24 months. Announcements happen later in 3 to 6 month compressed window. Price appreciation accelerates during announcement phase as retail discovers what institutions already knew.